Can I just ask members, as I'm about to call another member, I've already called Mr Bennett to order for making gratuitous and silly comments to the member. I'd invite him not to invite any more of them. Dr David Clark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise to speak to support this bill and to speak a little about the reason for it, because I sat on the select committee which heard the petitions of the guardians of the super fund and heard them explain their reasons why they think these amendments are necessary. Before I speak too much about that, I just wanted to correct a point raised by the previous speaker relating to my colleague's KiwiSaver bill, where he was, sorry, Kiwi Bank bill, where he was, the previous speaker was implying that this was about ministers getting their hands on assets and selling them off and so on, and meddling in the day-to-day affairs of Kiwi Bank. That simply is not accurate. My colleague's bill is about ownership of the bank, and it's merely a measure to stop the National Party flogging off Kiwi Bank in the way that they have flogged off so many other assets. I think New Zealanders are sick of a government that is focused on asset stripping. Sick of a government that's focused on asset stripping. They know the cost of everything and the value of nothing on that side of the house. And again, in this fund, precisely in this fund, we see a similar thing going on, because they have chosen not to invest in this fund, which is one of the funds that has the best returns in the world for a fund of its type, and foregone revenues of about $18 billion as a consequence of their mismanagement of this fund. And I just wanted to draw attention to the House to some of the awards that the New Zealand Super Fund Guardians have won in recent years. So a brief list here in front of me. 2015, they won the Gold Award in the 2015 Australasian Reporting Awards. 2014, they're winner of the Governance Award, Asia Investor Institutional Excellence Awards. Gold Award, 2014 Australasian Reporting Awards. Finalist, 2014 Global RI Reporting Awards. Guardians, Christina Billett named Joint 2014 Public Sector In-House Lawyer of the Year. 2013 winner, Best First Time Entrant 2013 Australasian Reporting Awards. Finalists again in the 2013 Global RI Reporting Awards, and so on. The list goes on. The 2012 they won a further 4 awards. 2011 they were runner-up in another significant set of Sovereign Wealth Fund awards, and that's because they have outperformed. They have consistently outperformed. The super fund that was set up by Michael Cullen is a very good one, and while Bill English may have called it a dog at the time, he seems very keen now to cosy up to that dog and shows an affection for it, which shows some dexterity in terms of his understanding of the issues involved. But the facts speak for themselves. This is a very successful fund, and that $30 billion that it is now worth is a result of returns of 15% over the past year and averaging 17% annually over the past 5 years, and around 10% per annum since inception. Extraordinary returns. And even if they were not so extraordinary, it would still be worth the government's while to be investing in that fund. There is little doubt amongst the commentators, rather than stockpiling debt as they seem so keen to do. It's a government, of course, we know, that has borrowed more than Sir Robert Muldoon's government. This government is the government in New Zealand history that has accumulated the most debt. And with that in mind, it is good to see them making 1 or 2 sensible decisions here. They've just achieved actually their first wafer-thin surplus, the first they've ever achieved, while the last Labor government achieved 9 out of 9. But nonetheless, they're making a sensible decision here and listening to the Guardian's advice to put these additional vehicles in place. Now, we had a debate in the Select Committee about whether these funds should be subject to the Official Information Act, and we sought information from officials. In the end, those of us on the committee were satisfied that the protections in place were appropriate, that the governance arrangements could be subject to the OIA insofar as the Guardians were directly involved with them, because the Guardians would appoint their own directors. They would often be supplying people to work on those particular funds. And so far as at their end of things, we could hold the guardians to account for the decisions that were made, albeit that the actual operation itself was at arm's length. And so we did debate those issues fairly robustly within the committee, and that is good parliamentary practice. But in the end, we decided that was appropriate. We did as a committee, though, suggest that there should be some involvement of the Minister of Finance in ticking off these operations to give the taxpayer a voice, because the Guardian Fund, of course, naturally is at arm's length for most of its operational decisions, and that we felt that there should be a role, albeit largely a symbolic one, for the Minister of Finance to have some oversight of these decisions and to only intervene when there was a kind of a really obviously strange thing going on. This Minister of Finance has somewhat arrogantly overruled the will of the Select Committee, which contained his own members. The very thing that his own parliamentarians recommended was rejected by the Minister of Finance, and in the most recent stage of the Parliament sitting on this bill, they rammed through some changes which would see the Minister of Finance wash his hands of any responsibility for the decisions the fund makes. And that is, of course, this government's general approach. They are not keen to be accountable in any way. They're very keen to sell off the assets that this country owns, very keen to minimise the size of government and to not be accountable for the actions of government insofar as they can get away with it. And we think that's unfortunate. We think the taxpayer should have had a voice in this, albeit not one where politicians were actually meddling in the day-to-day decision-making, but one where there was a veto at the level of the Minister of Finance. That aside, we will still support the bill because the vehicles themselves seem sensible. They're requested by the fund, which has been a very good fund, would have been an even bigger fund had this government not stopped the contributions that were being made. But again, we see that's the pattern of this government. They've got an ideological agenda which is around minimal involvement, around not putting taxpayer contributions into savings funds. They've said they won't deal with the superannuation issue. This Prime Minister has said that he won't deal with the issue during his time, during his Prime Ministership. He is leaving those difficult decisions to future governments. And of course, we've seen the wasteful spending that accompanies this reckless economic management, the television screens in MB, the $140,000 television screens.
Order. The member has been quite a long way away from the bill for quite some time. He will return to it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merely making the point that this decision the government's making in this bill is one that we think is not economically as smart as it might be, and so while we will be supporting the bill, it is not without some small reservations. Thank you very much.